My dad, Alan, had just gotten out of surgery for his knee, and honestly, the hospital bills were piling up faster than I could track them. He's 59, and while the surgery was routine, the recovery was going to be long. As the dependable daughter, the one who handles all the boring stuff no one else wants to touch, I, Karen Emerson, 28, was there, trying to sort through the mountain of paperwork. I pulled up his bank account online, ready to transfer funds for the latest physical therapy invoice. That's when I saw it, or rather, didn't see it. His savings, which had been sitting comfortably at just over $30,000, was gone. Not a penny. Just empty. My stomach dropped. I called the bank immediately, convinced it was some kind of fraud. They assured me there were no external flags, no suspicious activity reported, just a series of large withdrawals over the past few weeks. When I brought it up to my mom, Elise, who's 56, she barely looked up from her wedding planner. Oh, it's probably just a banking error, Karen. You know how those things are. Lucas will sort it out, won't you, honey? She beamed at my older brother, Lucas, 31, who was busy scrolling on his phone, a brand new, ridiculously expensive looking designer watch glinting on his wrist. Lucas just shrugged. Yeah, yeah, I'll call them tomorrow. Probably just a glitch. Don't stress, Mom. We've got bigger things to worry about, like Mila's floral arrangements. Mila, his fiancée, 29, was currently on the phone in the waiting room, loudly discussing imported peonies and a custom designed ice sculpture. Her wedding, set for a few weeks from now, was shaping up to be the kind of lavish affair you only see in magazines, far beyond what Lucas could realistically afford. A knot tightened in my gut. A banking error? $30,000 just vanishes? And Lucas, the golden child, who's never been responsible for anything more than his own bar tab, suddenly has a watch that probably cost more than my car? The pieces didn't fit. Not for a second. Everyone else seemed content to chalk it up to a glitch, to ignore the glaring red flags, but I couldn't. My dad, quiet and recovering in his hospital bed, gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod when Lucas wasn't looking. It was enough. I knew then that this wasn't just a banking error. This was something else entirely, and I was going to find out what. The day after I found the missing money, I called Lena. Lena Ward, 27, has been my best friend since college, and she's the kind of person who can find a needle in a haystack, especially if that haystack is digital. I explained the situation, the missing 30,000, Lucas's new watch, Mila's extravagant plans. Lena didn't even hesitate. Send me everything you have, she said, her voice already buzzing with that focused energy she gets when she's on a mission. Bank statements, transaction history, anything? Over the next few days, while I was still juggling hospital visits and trying to keep Dad comfortable, Lena was a ghost in the machine. She sent me updates, screenshots, and highlighted transactions. It wasn't just one big withdrawal, it was a series of smaller but still significant transfers. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, all within the last month. Each one was routed through a different intermediary account, a common trick, but Lena was good. She traced them. The first few led to generic sounding accounts, but then she started hitting pay dirt. One transfer for $7,500 went to a company that specialized in high end event catering. Another for $12,000 was routed to a luxury bridal boutique. My stomach churned. It was all pointing to Lucas and Mila. But then Lena found something else, something I hadn't expected. A series of smaller transfers, about $1,000 each, from my mother's personal account to Lucas's. They were dated just after Dad's surgery, and alongside them, odd brief emails between Lucas and Mom. Nothing explicit, just vague mentions of helping out and keeping things quiet for Dad. It hit me then, Mom knew, or at least she suspected and was actively covering for him. Karen, honey, Mom said to me one afternoon, her voice a little too sweet, a little too strained as I was leaving Dad's hospital room. You're doing so much for your father, and we all appreciate it. But please, don't go digging where you don't need to. This wedding is important. Let's not rock the boat, okay? Your brother needs our support right now. Her eyes, usually so focused on Lucas, held a rare, almost desperate plea. It wasn't about Dad's money, it was about protecting her golden child. The family loyalty divide solidified right there. Later that evening, Lena's message came through, a single screenshot with a triumphant emoji. The final transfer, a hefty $8,000, was clearly labeled M. Tran Wedding Floral Deposit. The M. Tran Wedding Floral Deposit screenshot hit me hard. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was concrete, and it brought back a flood of memories, years of Lucas getting away with everything. When we were kids, he once totaled mom's car joyriding with his friends, and she just sighed and paid for the repairs, blaming teenage impulsiveness. When he dropped out of college, she found him a consulting job with a family friend. Every time, he'd flash that charming smile, say he was sorry, and mom would melt. He was the golden child, always had been. I was just Karen, the reliable one, the one who cleaned up the messes. A week later, Mom hosted a pre wedding brunch at our house. Dad was home from the hospital by then, still moving slowly, but out of immediate danger. The house was buzzing with relatives and friends, all fawning over Lucas and Mila. Mila, of course, looked flawless, draped in some designer dress I couldn't even name. Lucas was playing the doting fiancé, laughing a little too loudly, his new watch still prominently displayed. I tried to act normal, but I couldn't bring myself to smile at them. My coolness towards Lucas and Mila was subtle, I thought, just a slight stiffness in my posture, a polite but brief answer when they spoke to me. But someone noticed. Mila's older sister, Savannah Tran, 32, caught my eye from across the room. Savannah was different from Mila, sharper, more observant, with a quiet intensity that Mila lacked. She ran her own successful marketing firm, and I'd always heard she was the real brains behind the Tran family's business ventures, not their father, Edgar, who was more of a figurehead. She had a way of looking at you that made you feel completely seen. Later, as I was refilling the ice bucket in the kitchen, Savannah appeared beside me. You're Karen, right? Mila's sister in law to be. Her voice was smooth, almost a purr. That's me, I said, trying to keep my expression neutral. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Look, I don't know what's going on, but I've seen that look before. You're upset about something. Just a friendly piece of advice. Don't start drama at the wedding. My family. We play for keeps. We don't tolerate public embarrassments. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of steel beneath the polite warning. She wasn't threatening me, not exactly. But she was telling me in no uncertain terms that the Tran family had a reputation to uphold, and they wouldn't hesitate to protect it. It was a chilling thought, but also, strangely, a validation. Someone, finally, was taking me seriously, even if it was an adversary. The warning from Savannah only fueled my resolve. Over the next 2 weeks leading up to the wedding, I worked relentlessly, Lena's digital sleuthing providing the backbone to my physical legwork. I cross referenced Lena's findings with public records, made anonymous calls, even posed as a potential client. I got my hands on actual florist invoices confirming the M. Tran wedding floral deposit was indeed for Mila's over the top arrangements. I obtained correspondence from the luxury bridal boutique detailing upgrades and last minute additions that perfectly matched the amounts Lena had traced. I even managed to get a confirmation from the caterer about a significant recent cash payment. It was all there, undeniable. The paper trail led directly from my father's account to Lucas, then to Mila's extravagant wedding. Dad, still recovering, noticed my intensity. He'd watch me from his armchair, a quiet understanding in his eyes. One afternoon, while Mom was out, he called me over. You're onto something, aren't you, Karen? He asked, his voice low. I showed him the stack of evidence. He looked at it, his face unreadable, then slowly nodded. Lucas. He's always been a handful. But this, he sighed, a deep, weary sound. Just be careful, honey. The fallout could be significant. He didn't tell me to stop, didn't try to protect Lucas, but his caution, his passivity, still frustrated me. He was supportive, yes, but he wouldn't act. It had to be me. The implications weighed heavily. Lucas's betrayal was one thing, but my mother's active denial, her willingness to cover for him, stung deeply. And then there was the Tran family, their pride, their reputation. Savannah's words echoed in my head. We play for keeps. I was about to blow up not just my family, but potentially a powerful one. The night before the rehearsal dinner, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. Her eyes were red rimmed, her voice tight with barely suppressed hysteria. Karen, I know you've been asking questions. I know you're upset about the money, but you need to let this go. This is Lucas's big day. If you ruin your brother's wedding, don't expect this family to forgive you. It wasn't a plea, it was an ultimatum, and it solidified my decision. I wasn't just doing this for Dad anymore. I was doing it for every time I'd been overlooked, every time Lucas had been excused. The day of the rehearsal dinner was a blur of last minute preparations. The venue was a swanky downtown hotel ballroom decked out with more flowers than a botanical garden. While Mom flitted around, fussing over table settings, I found myself in a quiet corner, watching Mila. She was in full bridezilla mode, her voice sharp as she berated a young waiter for a misplaced napkin. Do you know how much this event costs? She snapped, her face contorted in a way that erased all her usual glamour. Everything needs to be perfect. She dismissed him with a flick of her wrist, then turned to a harried looking event planner, demanding yet another upgrade to the lighting. Watching her, my resolve hardened. This wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about exposing the entitlement, the sheer audacity of it all. Lena, meanwhile, was still digging, even as I was gathering physical evidence. She'd promised one final piece of the puzzle. Her text came through just as Mila was tearing into a florist about the shade of ivory on a ribbon. Got it. Mila's emails to Lucas. She was asking him to find the cash for all these upgrades. Explicitly. She knew exactly where it was coming from. My jaw tightened. Mila wasn't just a beneficiary, she was an active participant. As the afternoon wore on, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Savannah. She looked impeccable, as always, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. A weariness, perhaps, or a quiet disapproval. Karen, she said, her voice low, can you spare a minute? I'm grabbing a drink at the bar before the madness begins. I hesitated, then nodded. We found a quiet spot away from the main chaos. She ordered a gin and tonic. I got a sparkling water. Look, she began, swirling the ice in her glass. Mila can be a lot. And Lucas, well, he's a charmer, but he's always been a bit of a lightweight, hasn't he? It wasn't a question. She knew. My family has worked hard for our reputation. We don't like loose ends. Or embarrassments. She paused, taking a sip. I've seen the way you look at them. You're not wrong to be concerned. Mila's entitlement is a problem. Lucas's flakiness is a problem. She reached into her small clutch and pulled out a sleek business card. Savannah Tran, CEO, Tran Marketing Group. She slid it across the table. In case you want to talk, off the record. I picked up the card, feeling the smooth, thick stalk between my fingers. It wasn't a threat this time. It was an invitation. An unexpected ally, or at least someone who understood the game. The rehearsal dinner began. The ballroom was stunning, bathed in soft, expensive lighting, the air thick with the scent of those imported peonies Mila had insisted on. Guests, a mix of our family and the formidable Tran clan, milled about, sipping champagne and exchanging polite pleasantries. Lucas and Mila, radiant and oblivious, held court at the head table, basking in the glow of their perfect, expensive world. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum beat against the elegant string quartet playing in the background. Dinner was served, speeches began. Uncle Bob told a rambling story about Lucas's childhood. Mila's father, Edgar Tran, 57, a man whose presence commanded immediate respect, delivered a short, powerful toast about family and new beginnings. Then the MC announced, and now, a special toast from the groom's sister, Karen. A hush fell over the room as I stood up. I felt every eye on me. Mila's smile faltered slightly. Lucas, across the room, shifted uneasily in his seat, his eyes darting to mine, a flicker of suspicion in them. My mother, Elise, at a nearby table, blanched, her hand flying to her throat. She knew what I was capable of. I walked to the microphone, my legs feeling strangely steady. I looked at Lucas, then at Mila, then at my mother, then at my father, who met my gaze with a quiet, encouraging nod. This was it. Good evening, everyone, I began, my voice clear, surprisingly steady. Tonight we celebrate Lucas and Mila and the beautiful future they're building together. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Building, it seems on a very solid financial foundation. Mila's eyes narrowed. Lucas's jaw tightened. Elise's face was a mask of horror. My father, Alan, recently had knee surgery, I continued, my voice gaining strength. And during his recovery, a significant amount of money, $30,000 to be exact, went missing from his savings account. Money he had set aside for his medical bills, for his future. A ripple went through the room. Whispers started. Edgar Tran at the head table leaned forward, his expression unreadable. At first, we thought it was a banking error, I said, looking directly at Lucas. But as it turns out, it wasn't an error at all. It was a series of transfers. I reached into my clutch, pulled out a small remote, and clicked a button. The large screen behind me, previously displaying a looping slideshow of Lucas and Mila's engagement photos, flickered. Then it displayed a bank statement. Highlighted in bright red were the dates and amounts. Beneath it, the florist invoice, then the bridal boutique receipt, and finally, Lena's screenshot of Mila's email to Lucas. Find the cash for these upgrades. Gasps erupted. Chaos. Mila sprang to her feet, her face contorted in a silent scream. Lucas's chair scraped back as he half rose, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Elise let out a small, choked cry. Then Edgar Tran, the patriarch, slowly, deliberately, stood up from the head table. His voice, though quiet, cut through the din like a knife. This wedding is cancelled. Pandemonium. The word barely covered it. Mila's scream ripped through the sudden silence that followed her father's declaration. Lucas, you idiot! You promised you'd handle it! She lunged at him, her perfectly manicured hands clawing at his expensive suit jacket. He shoved her back, his face contorted with rage. Me? You're the one who kept demanding more. Find the cash, Lucas, you said. Lucas then spun around, his eyes blazing with a terrifying fury, and lunged directly for me. You little bitch, you ruined everything! Before he could reach me, two burly security guards, who had materialized seemingly out of nowhere, grabbed him, pinning his arms behind his back. He struggled, shouting obscenities, but they held him firm. My mother, Elise, let out a heart wrenching sob and crumpled into her chair, burying her face in her hands. Karen, how could you? You destroyed your own family. You destroyed everything. Her voice was raw with grief and accusation, aimed solely at me. Just as a few guests started to rush towards me, my father, Alan, pushed himself up from his chair, moving faster than I'd seen him move since his surgery. He stepped in front of me, shielding me from the furious glares and whispers. He didn't say anything, just stood there, a silent, unwavering wall. Savannah, Mila's sister, was already at the head table. She spoke quietly to her father, Edgar, who nodded once, grimly. Then Savannah turned to Mila, who was still screaming at Lucas, now being half dragged, half escorted, out by another security guard. Mila, Savannah said, her voice cold and sharp, you're coming with me, now. Mila surprisingly went quiet, her fight draining out of her as her sister took her arm and led her away, her head held high despite the public humiliation. Guests were whispering, scattering, grabbing their coats. The beautiful, extravagant ballroom emptied out quickly, leaving behind a battlefield of overturned chairs and scattered napkins. My father turned to Lucas, who was still being held by security, his face purple with rage. Lucas, Dad said, his voice quiet but firm, carrying surprising weight. Until you make full restitution for what you've taken, and until you can look me in the eye and apologize, you are not welcome in this house. Not in this family. Outside, the cool night air hit me. I walked away from the chaos, past the valet stand, and sank onto a stone bench in a quiet, landscaped area. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me trembling. I felt empty. The victory was hollow. I had won, but at what cost? A few minutes later, Dad sat beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just reached out and squeezed my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. You saved me, Karen, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved me. The days following the rehearsal dinner were a strange, unsettling quiet. Lucas, true to my father's word, was gone. He'd packed a bag and left that night, not a word to anyone, especially not to Dad. Mila and her family had vanished from our lives just as swiftly. Edgar Tran, a man who clearly valued reputation above all else, ensured a swift and clean break. His lawyers contacted Dad's, and within a week, the full $30,000 was back in Dad's account, along with a terse, legally binding agreement that Lucas would have no further claim on any family assets until he could prove financial stability and a genuine change in character. It was clear the Tran family had forced Lucas to cough it up, likely to avoid any lingering association with fraud. My mother, Elise, remained a frozen statue of resentment. She rarely spoke to me, her eyes holding a deep, wounded accusation whenever I was in the room. She'd spend hours on the phone, presumably with Lucas, her voice hushed, her face etched with worry. I was the one who had shattered her perfect illusion, and for that she couldn't forgive me. The family she clung to, the one that revolved around Lucas, was broken, and she blamed me for picking up the hammer. Dad, though, was different. He moved a little easier now that the financial burden was lifted, and he'd started spending more time with me. We'd have coffee in the mornings, or he'd ask me about my day. Small gestures, but they spoke volumes. He never explicitly thanked me again, but the quiet trust in his eyes, the way he'd listen when I talked, was more than enough. He was slowly, carefully rebuilding our connection, one that had been overshadowed by Lucas for decades. Lena, ever practical, told me, "Look, you did what you had to do. It was messy, but it was right. Now it's time to stop being the family's fixer. Step out of their shadow, Karen. Live your own life." Her words resonated. I had spent so long defining myself by what I did for them, by being the invisible caretaker. A few weeks later, a small, elegant envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was Savannah Tran's business card, the same one she'd given me at the bar. Tucked behind it was a small, handwritten note. "Thank you. Some transgressions are not forgotten, even by enemies. S.T." It was a chilling reminder that while I had won this battle, the game of family and reputation was far from over. I was no longer invisible. I had forced the truth into the light, and in doing so, I had changed the balance of power in my family forever. But the victory was bittersweet. The price of that kind of reckoning, I realized, was a profound isolation from the very people you fought for. It was a true